Are we live? Great. Thank you for joining us. It is September 19th, 2022 at 7:02 p.m. My name is David Patty, and I am Council President. I'll be presiding over this meeting. This is a regular session of the Stayton City Council, and we will now be in session. First off, I'd like you all to join me in a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, real quickly, we have announcements. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay. Do we have any declarations of ex parte contacts, conflict of interest, bias, etc.? Okay, hearing none, I guess we'll move on. So I see that we do have one appointment this evening, the board and commission appointment of Lori Steele to the library board, and I'm wondering what you all would like to do with that item.
I'll move to, move the appointment.
Okay, we have one motion to move the appointment forward. Do we have another?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and poll the council. Tammy. Not Elizabeth.
Counselor McDonald,
Yes.
Counselor Quigley,
Yes.
Counselor Patty,
Yes.
motion passes 3-0.
Okay. Next thing we have on the agenda is going to be public comment. Do we get any of those green slips? Okay. Okay. Anybody in the audience wishing to speak tonight? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move forward to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda, we have approval of the August 15th, 2022 City Council regular session minutes and the August 19th, 2022 City Council special session minutes. We also have the approval of resolution number 1044. I assume you all have reviewed that. Can I get some action on this item on the agenda, please?
Yeah, Council Patty, I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion and a
Second that.
second from Councilor Quigley. Tammy, we'll go ahead and pull the council.
I'm sorry, Council President. The motion was to approve the minutes and not to approve the consent agenda. I think that you...
Ooh.
Sorry,
That's okay.
I rescind my motion. And I will remove to approve the consent agenda, including the minutes and ordinance 1044. So I'll withdraw my second for the previous one and second this one.
Thank you, Councilor. Tammy?
Counselor McDonald,
Yes.
Counselor Quigley,
Yes.
Counselor Patty,
Yes. Thank you.
Counselor Ort. Do not vote. And abstain. Motion passes 3-1.
Okay. All right. So with that, we'll move right in here to the public hearing. So this is going to be on ordinance number 1059. This is the legislative code amendments regarding dwellings as part of a live-work unit. And part of the commencement for the public hearing, I have a statement to read, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. So good evening, my name is David Patty. As council president, I will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of land use file number 12-06/22 concerning legislative amendments to the Land Use Development Code, establishing standards for dwellings as part of a live-work unit. This hearing is now open. The back counter is a copy of the proposed amendments, the agenda for this evening's meeting, which lays out the order in which people will be called on to speak during the public hearing, the city's rules of procedure for land use public hearings, and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You are encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I would ask audience if there are any objections to the notice for this hearing. I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case. I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of this body? I hear none. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name and address for the record. As a participant in the hearing, the city is required to notify you of the final results of the process. We are now ready for the staff report.
Thank you, Councilor Patty, members of the council, members of the public. The issue before the council, as was stated in the opening statement, is a public hearing on an ordinance which would enact legislative amendments to the Land Use and Development Code to establish standards for dwellings as part of a live-work unit. We had a discussion generally about the amendments, I think at the last meeting, mid-August. I'm seeing a bunch of nods over at the other table. The Planning Commission initiated this amendment as the result of staff coming to them seeking interpretation of the code, and rather than interpreting the code, the Planning Commission asked staff to develop amendments to clarify the code, and that's what you have before you. The issue came up because dwelling units, single-family dwelling units, are not permitted uses in the downtown mixed-use zone, the commercial zones, and the industrial zones. And there were, last year, 2 properties on the market in the downtown residential mixed-use zone that were most likely originally built decades and decades ago as single-family homes. Over the course of time, they were used exclusively for commercial use. And as I said, were placed on the market, and there were a number of potential interested buyers who were looking to use them as single-family homes, perhaps with some type of business use. And so therefore, I, as the administrator of the code, needed to determine whether that qualified as a live-work unit, or whether it was just a home occupation, or whether it really was a residence with some business activity going on. So as a result, you now have these amendments in front of you. If enacted, what they would do is establish standards to define what counts as a dwelling in a live-work unit, and to establish standards for live-work units. And those standards would require that the business use in the unit be located on the ground floor and be accessible directly from the outside without proceeding through the residential portion of the unit. So essentially establish a, quote, storefront, unquote, without using that term in the code. Secondly, that no more than 50% of the unit floor area may be dedicated to residential use, and would clarify that the off-street parking requirements that would apply are based on the minimum required for either the commercial use or the dwelling, but not both. Don't need to look at both uses, each use.
Okay, it sounds like we're live again. All right, it is 7:15. We're gonna go ahead and be back in session with this public hearing. Dan was right in the middle of a staff report. Not sure where you left off. If you wanna go ahead and.
I know where I stopped talking. I don't know straight up where everybody stopped hearing me.
This is true.
But anyway, the last provision is to assure that the units meet all of the structural and life safety codes. which, from reading the literature about live work units, is sometimes an issue depending on the nature of the business use. For people who are doing, small craft manufacturing type operations, might have kilns or blow torches or things like that happening will affect those fire safety, life safety code type things. So that's that's a synopsis of the amendment. As I said, this was initiated by the Planning Commission. They held their hearing at the end of August. There was no testimony from the public at their hearing, and they forwarded it to you with a unanimous recommendation to enact these amendments. So I will answer any questions you have before we turn it over to any possible public testimony.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate your report. Council questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Hey, Dan, thanks for this one section in here. It says best practices for codification indicates that definition should contain as little regulation as necessary, that any standards and qualifications should be placed in the body of the code rather than the definition section. So I appreciate that perspective. I think that's a little different, right? But I do have a question as far as the consideration of the ground floor. We have several bed and breakfasts downtown, but is that taken into consideration, or how's this potentially going to affect them?
This will not affect them because bed and breakfast is a separate category of use
Okay.
that is permitted in those mixed use or the commercial zones. I don't believe they're permitted in the industrial districts, but they are permitted in the commercial zones and the mixed use, downtown mixed use zone.
Okay. And then the last question I had was about the parking. So downtown, can you expand upon the parking one more time?
Sure. In the downtown, this off-street parking requirements in the amendments really doesn't do anything. Because in the downtown zone, there is no minimum off-street parking required for commercial uses. There is a requirement for one off-street parking space per dwelling unit. So if the live-work unit was in the downtown zone, they would be required to have one off-street parking space for the dwelling unit. It would impact potential live-work units in some of the commercial zones where there is an off-street parking requirement. And what the code says is apply the minimum off-street parking for either the commercial use or the dwelling. But you don't need to say, oh, you've got a business use and a dwelling, so therefore you need 4 parking spaces instead of just 2.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for Dan?
Yeah, one question.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Just related to the same thing, just related to the parking, I think it's just a clarification, it's nitpicky, but is the greater of the two, or parking requirements, that is?
Actually, what the code says, it is the minimum required for either the commercial use or the dwelling.
So it should be maybe technically modified out to
That
say.
may be a reasonable amendment to make.
And it would be, the intention would be the greater.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions for Dan? Okay. I have one. I was just kind of curious about Dan while we're talking here. And this is just me trying to figure out legislative intent, a little bit of the Planning Commission. The 50% figure, how was that reached, I guess, is my question.
That was reached in part looking at the standards for home occupations. So if you, living in the residential zone, wanted to have your business in your home, our code says the business use may not be larger than 50% of your floor area, or there's a number in there, 500 square feet, whichever is smaller. So again, to distinguish between a home occupation in a dwelling unit and a live work unit, we said the business or the residential use may not be more than 50%.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other questions from council? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to proponent's testimony. Hearing none, we will move on to opponent's testimony. Additional testimony. All right, we'll go to a staff summary.
Considering all of that extensive testimony, I have nothing more to add.
Well, thank you, Dan, I appreciate that. Well, with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing. This time, I'll read that later. So, moving on to that, we'll go ahead and get to council deliberation. What do you folks want to do with this one?
Councilor Patty, I'd like to offer a motion to approve the first consideration of ordinance 1059.
We have a motion from Councilor Quigley. Do I hear a second?
Second it to move to deliberation or discussion.
All right, I have a second from Councilor Hort. Deliberation. Go ahead, guys.
So, to Councilman McDonald's point, so you were, I just want to get clarification, so you were saying that it should be, there, and what it says right now is it's the minimum of either the commercial use or the residential use?
Well, right now it says either, it doesn't specify the lesser of or the greater of, just two minimums. So I think if I were making a motion, then I will, if we didn't pass this, then I would make a modification just to clarify that language to specify the greater of either the commercial use minimums or the residential use minimums.
So I guess my question is, do we want it? What do we want that to be? We want it to be the greater or the?
I think that was my question, Dan, and that would be the intention, would be the greater of.
Real quick, Councilor Quigley, go ahead.
I was just going to think, from an enforcement standpoint, how do we do that? I mean, is that splitting hairs? Just an open-ended question, I don't know. How are we going to go in there and say, okay, which one's which? Just an open question.
Which one's which? and
The
why?
greater of, define it again.
No, you're right, it is splitting hairs. But I think it's language that should be clarified.
So, I apologize. So just so I understand that correctly, if we say the greater of the two, then does that mean that, let's say, Dan said that if it's a, mixed use, that the commercial side doesn't require any parking, but the dwelling does require one space, then there has to be at least one space.
Right, correct.
It's not that there doesn't have to be any, because right now, the way that it's written, there doesn't have to be any, basically.
Well, it says either, so that was the question, it says either or. And that's, I don't know who makes that decision unless it's specified.
Well, okay, so it says shall be the minimum required for either. So the minimum required, I messed that up in my head, I just wanna make sure that I'm understanding it correctly.
So they're both minimums, you have a minimum for the residential, and a
Just
minimum
one.
for the commercial. So there's
Just
two different
zero.
minimums. So there you go, it's either or, so it's, the fact that we're confused by the language is the reason we probably should modify it.
I'll withdraw my motion, then we can have it edited.
Okay, we have a motion withdraw at this point. Do I hear another?
Withdraw my second.
All right, motion and a second withdrawal. Do I hear another motion?
Yeah, I will go ahead and move to approve the first consideration of ordinance 1059 with the following modification to clarify the language regarding parking minimums to specify the greater of the two minimums in the next, in two uses.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve first consideration ordinance 1059 with the modification to include whichever is more parking. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. That about right? Okay, cool. Do I hear a second?
Can we specifically read the motion is, where the word is?
Yeah, I just don't know how I know what you're trying to say, I just don't know how that should look.
Here's how I will draft it if this motion passes. Off-street parking. The minimum off-street parking shall be the greater of the minimum required for either the commercial use or the dwelling, in accordance with section 1720.060, but not both.
Sounds good.
Second piece.
Real quickly, after they have that all written down, could we just get a reading of the motion in a second? Just for the record.
But that's the problem.
Yeah, right,
And I think technically, you should vote on the amendment and then vote on the amended ordinance. So that might help you guys in the writing of the motion.
Well, we can, we're trying to figure out the time of it.
So I think, if I may, the motion would be to amend the language in ordinance 1059 to read for off-street parking, the minimum off-street parking shall be the greater of the minimum required for either the commercial use or the dwelling. That would be the motion that you would make if you wanted to make such a motion.
Yes, I'm just, I heard, I understand that, that wasn't the way the guidance was given to us on our sheet here, so.
And that very well may be, I'm just actually reflecting on the advice that the attorney gave us most recently on the psilocybin ordinance. So honestly, I would go with what you have on your cheat sheet then.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're voting on approving the first consideration of ordinance 1059 with the modifications already mentioned. How's that? Okay, go ahead and pull the council, please. Oh, actually, forgive me. Let's deliberate on that.
I just want to hear the actual motion written. I'm just gonna, that will be codified after we approve it or not.
So it should say the minimum off-street parking shall be the greater of the minimum required for either the commercial use or the dwelling in accordance with section 17.20.060, but not both. A second.
We have a motion and we have a second at this point. Is there any further deliberation on this motion? Okay, hearing none, go ahead and move to a vote on this item. Tammy, please pull the council.
Counselor Ort,
Yes.
Counselor Patty,
Yes.
Counselor Quigley,
Yes.
Counselor McDonald.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, so the city council's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days in accordance with ORS 197.830. Okay, moving on to general business. Next item is going to be Ordinance 1056. This is the annexation and comprehensive plan map amendment application from James and Jolene Cruther, Golf Club Road, second consideration. With that, we'll take staff report from Dan Fleischman.
Thank you. So the issue before you on this item is the second consideration of ordinance 1056, which will annex approximately 11 acres of land on Golf Club Road. And will amend the comprehensive plan map designation for the property from residential to industrial, and will assign light industrial zoning to the property. You held your public hearing on this back on August 15th. The council voted at that time to approve the first consideration, but it was not a unanimous decision, requiring it therefore to come back for the second consideration. You've got in your packet the amended findings and the changes are highlighted in yellow on pages 6 and I thought there were 2 different pages, but maybe it's just page 6. Oh, and 2, page 2 and 6 of Exhibit C, the findings in the ordinance, and those changes are reflecting the testimony that you received at your public hearing. So the bottom of page 2 mentions the written testimony that was received, and on page 6 again mentions that public testimony in relation to the finding relative to the approval criteria about proposed designation will not significantly adversely affect existing or planned uses on adjacent lands. You are presented with the options of approving the second consideration of the revised ordinance as presented, or approving the second consideration with modifications, or still you have the options, I guess, of going back and approving the annexation, but not the comprehensive plan amendment, which would keep the property as residential zoning, or to deny the application, which would require a new set of findings to justify that decision. I will answer any questions you may have.
Do you have any questions for Dan before we move to public comment?
I guess I do, Counselor.
Go ahead.
Hey, Dan, on page 2 of 8, under agency comments, it says the city engineer pointed out the need for an agreement with the property owner obligating the property to frontage improvements and utility connections when there's future development on the property. Is that something you would do in advance of this, or when it comes time to develop the property?
It is incorporated into the ordinance in, let me find it. In section 3 of the ordinance itself, page 2 of 3 of the ordinance, before you get to any of the exhibits. Section 3 of the ordinance says, the applicant shall execute an agreement with the city to be recorded in the Marion County deed records, obligating the applicant and future property owners to construct frontage improvements and connect the existing buildings to city utilities at such time of future development of the property. And then section 10 of the ordinance says, upon adoption by the city council and by adoption by the city council and the mayor signing, this ordinance shall become effective 30 days after the date of the signing of the agreement required by section 3 above. So therefore, the annexation does not become effective unless the agreement is executed and recorded.
Okay, and who follows up on that?
That will be staff. I mean,
Okay.
we've already produced a draft agreement and sent it out for review.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. We'll go ahead and move to public comment on this matter. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to council discussion. Okay. Do we want to reach a decision on this one tonight?
We're still under a council discussion, I'll offer my thoughts.
Please do.
I would ask that the council consider again the criteria of annexation and what you heard at the last meeting. Essentially, we heard confirmation that the only reason why this piece of property is up for consideration for annexation is to get out of county jurisdiction. That's not a criteria for annexation, and we're setting a bad precedent for doing that. And the second piece of it is, we're taking residential zoning, essentially, and turning it into industrial zoning, with the entire strip of industrial property. And that part of town hasn't been touched in years. The last thing I will say is, remember what happened when we had annexation of the most recent annexation on Fern Ridge. And I'm not to say this is gonna happen, but that was turned around once it was approved and put up for sale. And, you know, we come under control of that, but just think about that from that perspective. So that's where I stand.
Any other councilors wishing to make statements or a motion this time?
Councilor Patty. No statements, but I will say, hearing nothing else, I will go ahead and move that we approve second consideration of ordinance 1056 as presented.
Okay, I have a motion to approve ordinance 1056 as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Tammy, would you please poll the council?
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Counselor Quigley?
No.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Ord?
Yes.
Motion passes 3-1.
Okay, so moving on, we got resolution number 1043. And this is going to be payment. Go.
Councilor Patty, before you do that,
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think we included it in the packet, but you should read the closing statement that was part of the
That's a great idea.
previous thing, because this finalizes the action on that land use.
Thank you. So in regards to the piece of business we just concluded, ordinance 1056, the city council's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days in accordance with ORS 197.830. Okay, thank you, Dan, I appreciate that. With that, we will move to the staff report on resolution number 1043, and that is again, payment in lieu of taxes agreement for the North 3rd Avenue apartments.
So this be me again. The issue before you on this agenda item is acceptance of an agreement with the Marion County Housing Authority, the Stayton Apartments Limited Partnership, for an annual payment in lieu of taxes. Stayton Apartments Limited Partnership is the entity that is building the 72-unit apartment complex on North 3rd Ave between the assisted living facility and Max Credit Union. Their development proposal was reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission in, I think it was November, it's at least 6 months, 8 months ago. They have proceeded through the site development permit process with the Public Works Department and City Engineer, and are very close to receiving their site development permit from the Public Works Director. Essentially, their engineering plans have all been approved. They need to execute some, they need to take care of some paperwork. Operation and maintenance agreement for the stormwater management system, developer agreement for extending, for the sewer construction, and any bonding for work in the public right of way. I believe those will be the items, but essentially the plans have been finally approved after a number of iterations back and forth between the design engineer and the city engineer. The partnership is partnering with the Marion County Housing Authority to provide federal project-based vouchers that will provide rent subsidies for a number of the units in the development. And as such, under state law, because the housing authority is a partner in the ownership of the development becomes exempt from property taxes. As a condition of that partnership, the housing authority requires the developer to enter into an agreement for payment in lieu of taxes to the city. And what you have in front of you is an agreement to do that. What's in the agreement is, and what you see before you is the second or third draft of the agreement. The original agreement that was presented to the city called for an annual payment of $13,000. The city's response was we would like to see an escalation clause. They agreed to 3% increase each year, which is what we could expect their property tax payment to increase each year under Oregon's property tax laws. And so we requested that, and they agreed to include that in the agreement. I know there's been questions the past couple of weeks from a couple of council members. The choice before you tonight is essentially to accept this agreement as presented. I guess you have the option to request some other number besides 13,000. But the city has no choice into whether this development will be exempt from property taxes. That's a matter of state law as a result of the partnership involving the County Housing Authority. Staff has attempted to analyze perhaps what the city's tax revenue might be if this was not property tax exempt. That's been very difficult for us to do because we do not have any new apartment complexes in the city in which to gauge what the assessed value may be. Looking at Marion County Assessor's records, there's a wide disparity in both real market value and assessed value for every property in the city, but particularly for multifamily. There are other properties in the city that are owned by Marion County Housing Authority, and they pay a payment in lieu of taxes. There's two other apartment complexes, one on Ida Street and one at the bottom of the hill from the hospital, Oak Village Estates. I forget what the one on Ida Street is called. But we receive, for those two properties combined, we receive an annual payment in lieu of taxes of somewhere above 11,000. It's about 11,600, I think. That payment is based on a formula that reflects their rental income minus a percentage of their rental income minus their utility costs, as opposed to a defined number. So at least with this agreement, there is some certainty as to what the city can be expecting to receive in the payment in lieu of taxes. I will answer any questions you have if I haven't touched on them already in my presentation.
Questions from council for Dan? Okay, Councilor Ward, go ahead.
Where did the 13,000 come from?
I asked that of the developers today, and the response I got was it was suggested by the housing authority. And it is the same, they have a project under development currently in Malala, and it is the same as they'll be paying Clackamas County for that project. And that project is of a similar size. May not be exactly 72, but it's not significantly different.
Follow.
Okay, so then the 3% that comes from the assessed value and how much, because in here it says, it talks about inflation, and our inflationary rate right now is about 8%. So I'm just wondering where we, if that, but that specifically comes from assessed value, correct?
That comes from the limitations in Oregon statute on how much the assessor may change the valuation of your property or my property
Sure.
each year, regardless of the change in real market value.
But this doesn't fall, it doesn't necessarily fall under that, just the 3% came from that.
Correct. Because that, if they were not exempt from taxes, then their taxes are likely to go up 3% per year.
Councilor Quigley, go ahead.
And then when you say they, you're talking about the developer, right?
Correct.
And you're talking about Clackamas County. The project they have is in
The
Malala.
project that they have in Malala,
Right,
yes.
is that Clackamas County?
Yes.
So we're being told that it came from the housing authority, but we didn't confirm.
No, I learned that this afternoon. Did not
Okay, so
confirm that with Marion County
Sure.
Housing
Two
Authority.
different counties, two different sets of rules apparently, maybe, we don't know. I just think it's an arbitrary number one. I think it's really, really light for the services that will be added to our community. I'd like to know how we got to that number, as Councilor Ort mentioned. I guess when I was looking at it, from a different perspective as far as the assessed value times our local taxing amount, and trying to determine that way. I don't know if that's the right way to do it or not, but I also understand that none of the other taxing jurisdictions within the community receive that from it, correct?
That is correct.
And those folks weren't even aware, or maybe they were invited to the discussion?
As far as I know, they were not invited to the discussion.
Okay.
The Marion County Commissioners invited, these folks are also doing a development project in Mill City that they're partnering with Marion County Housing Authority on. The Marion County Commissioners had a meeting last October, and my understanding is city officials from Stayton and Mill City were invited to that meeting. Councilor Ort and I attended. I think there was the mayor from Mill City. Oh, right, Alyssa was there.
No, our mayor was there.
Oh, okay, it was on Zoom, I don't remember who was there.
And at that time, was this rolled out in this manner as far as the fees go?
The purpose of the discussion was to talk about the payment in lieu of taxes.
Okay.
The number was not mentioned at that time. The quick analysis that I did after that meeting, when I looked at the other apartment projects in Stayton that receive some state or federal subsidy, was that the payment in lieu of taxes that the city receives from the two Marion County Housing Authority projects probably exceeds what those projects would pay in taxes to the city, but not what their total property tax bill would be.
Okay, but without actually having that ability to understand that, just a guesstimate.
Yes.
So this resolution, if I understand it correctly, is basically saying, we, the city, agree to accept the $13,000 for the project in lieu of taxes. And if we don't accept that tonight, the project still goes forward and the city receives a zero at that point.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question for that, Dan. Before we get too far away, can we turn around and ask for more payment in lieu of taxes of this developer before formalizing any kind of agreement? And if so, what do you think, in your best professional judgment, would be a good, here's where this question's coming from, Dan. Every time we have any kind of development or annexation, we have everybody coming in here and they talk to us about city services and how much it's gonna cost this community. And I'm with Councilor Quigley at this point, $13,000 is not enough. So I'm just trying to understand, like, can we turn around and make this work with a different figure in mind?
I think that we have the ability to go back and renegotiate the amount.
Thank you.
And Dan and council, if I may, I think that I just saw them pop up on the screen. We do have representatives from the development here if you wanted to talk to them directly. And then I also just wanted to add, I did math, and I'm not a mathematician, but I believe that with the 13,000 to Stayton, kind of doing reverse math, is about a $3 million assessed value. And so I think a question to ask of you as well as potentially the developer is whether or not we think the assessed value would actually be more than that, and then kind of then backing into what maybe a more appropriate payment in lieu of taxes might be. So that's just, I'll put that out there.
Did you have a question, Councilor Orr? Okay. Did you? So one thing I'll say back to that is it's 72 units though. You know what I mean? Like I hear your $3 million of real market assessed value, but 72 units to me is a huge strain on this community, and 13,000. That's where I'm coming from on that. But go ahead, Councilor Quigley, you look at something.
No, I was just gonna say, I guess if we could determine what the assessed value of each individual 72 units is really what the way we could start the equation perhaps. So, but again, Dan says there's no way to determine what the assessed value of this two. I'd like to have some kind of, there's a hand up there.
Well, go ahead and entertain something from the developer. Looks like they had something to say that might be kind of relevant. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Brianna Martine with Greenlight Development, and we are hoping to close on the construction of this apartment on October 6th. I can answer some of your questions. We had a bank appraisal on the property that was performed by our lender to justify the loan amount that we'll be receiving for this project. They provided us with both an unencumbered value, so that would be if we were to lease these units up at market rate, as well as an encumbered value, which values the project based on the rents that we're actually going to be allowed to charge, which are 60% of the median family income and 30% of the median family income. The unencumbered value is $8.9 million. I have worked through the methodology in that appraisal to back into a projected tax amount, and it's actually pretty close to what Dan had projected in the memo that he provided related to this. It's roughly $53,000. And so when I look at Stayton's percentage of that, it would be $11,440. So by signing this agreement, the city of Stayton would actually be receiving slightly more than the portion that they would receive if it were just to go through the taxation formula. And do you guys mind if I just speak to a couple of the items that you brought up?
Please do.
So we are, like I mentioned about, a little bit over 10 business days away from closing this transaction. We have a fixed closing date with the state of Oregon. This involves tax exempt bond financing, tax credit, equity, and we have received, the city of Stayton really has received just under $10 million of grant funding from the state of Oregon towards supporting this project. We really think of affordable housing as infrastructure for the community, and we understand that there are services that the city will be providing for this project, but we also think that we're providing housing for people who desperately need it in this community as well. So we think we're providing infrastructure, if you can think about it that way. In terms of renegotiating the dollar amount at this point, our permanent loan amount is based on this dollar amount, which we've been talking about with the Housing Authority and the city for months and months and months. It's accounted for in our appraisal, and that is what fixes our permanent loan size. So if this fee gets larger, our permanent loan gets smaller, and we have a gap in the budget that we cannot, don't have the resources to close it at this point. We've kind of used all of the financial mechanisms that we have to make this pencil. And to Dan's point, if you guys don't sign this, I think that what happens is that we just have to close without it, which would just mean full tax exemption. We are trying to be good partners with the cities that we work in, and backed into this number with the Housing Authority months and months ago, thinking that it would be a fair exchange, with acknowledging that we should pay something to the city, while also recognizing that we're bringing important infrastructure in. So anyhow, I'm happy to answer any more questions or provide clarifications or calculations to how I got to my numbers if needed.
Could we get your name real quick?
Sure.
Cameron.
My name is Brianna Murtaugh.
Okay. Any other counselors have questions for Brianna before we deliberate a little bit here? Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Brianna. Oh, go ahead, Counselor Ward.
Brianna, can you just clarify, you said that the valuation that you gave us, the 8.9 million, was that the red cap rate or that was the market rate?
Yeah, so that is from an appraisal that the
That was
lender.
the unencumbered or the encumbered?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Was that the unencumbered or the encumbered appraisal?
That's, the 8.9 is the encumbered valuation.
Are you able to share with us what the unencumbered?
Yeah, the unencumbered, which is not real because our rents will be restricted, but it's 18.45 million.
Thank you.
Real quick, I guess this is just from my gee-whiz knowledge at this point. When was that $13,000 figure reached throughout this process? At what point? Just out of curiosity.
The 13,000 was included in the draft pilot agreement that was presented to the city maybe 6 weeks ago, but probably closer to 4.
And counsel, I'll be completely honest with you. Dan shared that with me, we shared it with the attorney. I brought up 3%. I did not realize where it hadn't been discussed and that we hadn't had these conversations, or probably would have gotten feedback from counsel, early on in the process. I thought that this was all known until Councilor Quigley began asking questions about it, and then we moved forward from there.
There was no discussion between the housing authority and the city, or between Green Light and the city, since the October meeting until the draft agreement was received in preparation for tonight's meeting.
Councilor Quigley.
And Brianna talked about the $10 million grant. Can you elaborate on that? Tell us what that's about. I mean, this is all new to me.
It is not a grant to the city. It may reflect the value of the federal contribution to the project. And perhaps, I don't know the details of how things work, perhaps it's going to the county housing authority. As part of working with Green Light, they approached, because there's federal money involved, there's an environmental review process that needed to be gone through. They approached the city, seeing if we were willing to work with them on that, be what the feds call the responsible entity. The city agreed to do that on a fee basis. And we worked through that process. We just got it finalized last week. The recipient of the funding is the housing authority. It is dedicated to this project, so to that extent it's coming, quote, to Stayton, but it's not coming to the city of Stayton.
Okay, so when you say you were asked to help with the wetlands, can you elaborate on that? Does it cost, did that cost us something, or?
The developer will be receiving a bill for my time, as well as the, shall we call it, incidental expenses the city had. We needed to publish a notice in the paper and things like that.
Okay. I mean, as you can tell, we're all caught by surprise on this issue, and I think had we had a little bit more time to digest this and analyze it, that would have improved it. I feel myself being in a bind here. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting.
So,
Go ahead.
Cassie, sorry, so it does appear that the closing isn't until the 6th, and this does need to be, something needs to happen by the 6th, and I'm just, I guess, wondering if this isn't something that the council can table, and I'd like to get feedback from Brianna to make sure that our understanding is correct, but if the council were to table this tonight to allow a little bit more digestion and discussion to see whether or not there's any room in that number, and having the council make a decision on October 3rd, at their October 3rd meeting, in advance of the closing, if that would be an idea.
So earlier, it sounded a little bit more to me like this, if we were to reach a decision, that may be too late. Is that the case, Brown?
Yeah, I mean, our hard closing date is the 6th. We're supposed to have a soft close on the 4th of October. And we would need an understanding by our financial partners that this was in place in advance of that. And unfortunately, with tax-exempt bond financing, it's not something that we can push out 3 or 4 days. We have to go back to the state and see if they have dates available on their calendar to close the bond financing, which could potentially push this out for months. And we would lose our interest rate lock on our permanent loan. So I feel badly that this hasn't been brought up to you guys before. On our Loyola transaction, the fee went to the housing authority. And so we were just negotiating directly with them. So we did the same thing with this one, and we should have been talking with you guys as well. So I feel badly that we put you in this position.
Dan?
Go ahead, Councilor.
I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, I'm like thinking of a million different places. So with my concern and one that I brought up to the county commissioners after that October meeting, and I can't remember exactly what was said back to me, and I spoke with Julie about this too, was my concern was that we want to be good partners, we want to have affordable housing for our workforce here in Stayton, and I think I can speak for all the counselors when I say that we want to have, housing here in this capacity. But my concern was that over 100% of our property taxes already goes to our police force specifically. And one of the things that was brought up when we were talking about a development that Councilor Quigley had mentioned that was going in that wanted to put in a bunch of apartments, and we kind of squashed that and said we want it to look different because one of the things is that when you get more people in a more saturated place, he said that you tend to get more calls just because you have more people in one place. And so my concern, long-winded, is that I want to make sure that this 13,000 is going to help out with that. And I think that even though people are getting subsidized housing, which again I don't have a problem with, but I want the project and that community to still be contributing to the full community and not having more burden placed on other taxpayers. So my question is this going to cover services? And that might not be a question for you, that's a question for any of our staff members. But I think that there has to be a balance there. I understand like a tax exemption, but this project is also getting a lot of tax money to make this project work. And then we're not getting any taxes if it was zero, so. That was my question /
So it looks like Dan is doing some math.
I'm trying to read, I did some math earlier today in response to Councilor Quigley's. Unfortunately, I didn't bring it with me. But my recollection is that the budget for the police department is 2.4.
I believe it's 2.6.
$2.6 million. We have 3,300 households in the city.
It was $789, I think was the.
So yeah, so roughly $800 per household we spend on police services. Times 72 is $57,000.
Councilor Patty.
Go ahead, Councilor.
To Councilor Ward's point, I guess I would ask, so the 13 grants going to go into the general fund, or where will it be directed every year?
And, sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing, so if anyone's directing a question to me, Dan, do you mind repeating?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Juliet.
So the question was where that fund would be directed to, and honestly, I do not know off the top of my head, but I imagine it would be the general fund unless there is some restriction for some reason that it shouldn't be, but I don't know why that would be when its intention is to repay taxes. So I believe it would be general fund, and that's probably something that we'll want to identify and potentially earmark if that's what council so chooses through the budget process.
Thank you. Any questions for Dan?
Oh, Dan, Councilor Manning.
Go ahead, Councilor.
This isn't off topic of this specific discussion, but for this project, you were saying that they had a list of things that they needed to do. Was it transportation survey or whatever that's all done?
As part of the site plan review process before the planning commission, there was a traffic impact analysis submitted, reviewed by the city's transportation planning consultant. There were some fairly minor technical questions, tweaks that needed to be done, but essentially the conclusions reached by the consultant and the city's consultants concurred was that the addition of these 72 units would not impact traffic flow significantly, would not require any intersection improvements. There was a recommendation for striping of the crossing, the pedestrian crossing at 3rd and Fern Ridge, which has been the topic of discussion before this body for a number of years.
There's a pedestrian crossing?
There's not, well, there are pedestrians crossing there.
But they didn't think that there needed to be.
There was not a recommendation for signalization or any changes to the intersection.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Dan? We can move to discussion. Actually, did we get public comment yet? I don't think we did. Any members of the public looking to speak on this matter? Okay. Well, that settles that. Let's get to council discussion at this point.
Councilor Penny?
Go ahead, Councilor.
I mean, I really wish people were here because we're gonna make a decision on this and people are gonna be irate about it, whichever way we do things, and for lack of a better term, just complain about the decision that we made, but not be part of the process, and that is very unfortunate and frustrating to me. So to Brianna's point, if you take the taxation rate and if you were to do a straight taxation rate with the encumbered amount of 8.9 million, Stayton would get 11,000, and we would get and we're getting 13, so we're actually getting more this way. But to Quigley's point, I don't know, I wish that we would have been more involved in this project. I was really kind of looking forward to it, but also it just kind of all of a sudden came to us, and now I don't feel good about it, because we haven't really had time to unpack it. I don't know. I want to make sure that when we have smart growth, and that when we're bringing housing into the community, that we're also thinking about our infrastructure, because we are doing a needs assessment, and I'm sure you're going to come to us as staff and say, oh, we need to raise our rates, and that's frustrating when we're not bringing in money necessarily to offset any of some of our costs, and this is actually going to encumber our taxpayers more. So that's a frustrating place to be in.
Councilor Petty?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Orrick. I think really if the rest of the community saw this tonight, our hands being forced either one way or the other. So our options tonight are to accept a $13,000 or not accept it, and then we get zero out of it. So $13,000 is a paltry amount, in my opinion, for what's going to change the face of our community. I really wish that this body had an opportunity to look at it a little closer. You know, this is basically sprung on us tonight, with the exception of I knew about it maybe a week ago and started asking questions. But the way I see it tonight, we don't have an option. We're kind of stuck here. So really it's development either way, and we get either 13 or we get 0.
Councilor Patty?
Go ahead, Councilor.
I just want to add, I don't know, I mean, I'm not an engineer, I just don't understand how we're gonna add 72 units to Third Ave, down by Dairy Queen. I'm thinking about the cars going in and out of there. If you have 72 households, they each have a car, they each have 2 cars, how much traffic that's gonna be in the mornings. You have people trying to get onto Fernwood, that's just gonna be crazy. It's gonna be absolutely crazy, and I just don't understand how there's no impact to the traffic. Or any suggestions, and that's not necessarily to staff, that's just a frustration of these transportation impact things.
Councilor, I share your concern on that,
And
especially,
someone died there,
yeah, there was a
someone got
fatality.
hit by a
I'm with
car,
you.
and we're gonna be adding more traffic, I just don't understand.
It might be helpful, and this is coming from me, Dan. Do you have any insights about why that didn't come out of the traffic study? I guess I don't understand either.
I guess the only insight that I can provide to that is that things, from a traffic engineering point of view, things aren't as bad as the public perceives them to be. So when you or Councilor Ort look at an intersection and go, oh, there's all this traffic here, the traffic engineers go, oh, this intersection isn't close to capacity. There's plenty of room for additional traffic before it doesn't function. I mean, again, the consultant that prepared the report did it and came to a certain set of conclusions. The city's traffic consultant reviewed their work, agreed with their methodology and conclusions.
No. Okay, traffic study or no traffic study, there's still a death there. Councilor McDonald, do you have anything else to weigh in here?
I guess the one thing I can say is that I understand the concerns of the other councilors. And I do agree that I wish we had more time to look at this. I came to the council with the specific intent to get more affordable housing built in Stayton. Because of that, I think my concerns about whether we're getting enough money from this proposal, or the traffic concerns, or the utility concerns, or the police service concerns, are kind of outweighed by just wanting I want this project to happen. I want those affordable units to exist. I believe the service that we provide by having those in our housing inventory is very valuable. There's certainly citizens that need those. So I tend to lean in the direction that I would accept this proposal. Even understanding the issues, because I believe it's worth the cost and worth the risk.
Thanks. Anybody else wishing to speak about this before we do a decision? Okay, hearing nothing, let's move to a decision. Anybody want to offer up some action on this one?
Councilor Patty?
Go ahead, Councilor Quigley.
I'll offer a motion to approve resolution 1043 as presented.
Okay, we got a motion to approve resolution 1043 as presented. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? Councilor, go ahead.
Yes, I would just like to say that this process right here has made me think that we need to examine, these projects a little bit more and ask more questions. I can admit that when we were back in October, and this is brought to me to be part of that discussion, I didn't really understand what that entailed and the numbers. I knew that we were talking about in lieu of property taxes. I didn't quite understand what that meant in terms of like how much money that would be. And then I did bring up, of course, the concern that adding more housing, while beneficial, I completely agree, Councilor McDonald, it's beneficial. But we also have to make sure, again, that we have smart growth and that we are making sure that we're supporting our infrastructure. If we say that housing is an infrastructure, well, there's streets, there's water, there's sewer, there's all these other things that also come along with having housing as an infrastructure. And so I think that there was a communication piece that was missing. In that respect. So I would just say that I would like some more communication moving forward with these.
Okay, any other discussion before we move up? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move to one. Tammy, will you go ahead and poll us, please?
Councilor Patty,
Yes.
Councilor Quigley,
Yes.
Councilor McDonald,
Yes.
Councilor Ort.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, so we have passage of resolution number 1043. Looks like that was the last item on the agenda before communications from city staff. It looks like we have a couple different things coming from the police department this evening. Captain Johns, thank you for joining us.
And as Captain Johnson is coming up, I asked her to start actually by giving you guys a brief update on some activity that occurred this weekend that made some social media news, but also some media news. And so she'll just give you a little bit of a information update on that before she gets into the topics that she was planning on speaking about.
Excellent, thank you.
Nice to be back with you guys. I was gonna say this week, but my days and weeks were, or days of the week are all messed up right now, so. It was last week I saw it. So I have been asked to give an update. There was a press release that came out by Marion County Sheriff's Office and actually made Portland news. I was pretty surprised. The press release did mention that it stemmed from an incident in Stayton, and that was just a mistake. So how or why that happened, I'm not sure. I talked with the PIO today, and he was taking a much needed and deserved day off, and someone was curbing his duties. And again, why or how that happened, I'm not sure. The incident was in Sublimity. There was a car prowl, and then they became involved in the investigation, ultimately made arrests. We do work very collaboratively with Marion County, and so one of their sergeants actually called me, and I sent one of our officers over because it all ties into, oddly enough and coincidentally enough, the stolen cars that I had put in the Friday update a couple weeks ago. So our officers were able to clear those stolen vehicle cases through arrest by responding to sublimity and adding additional charges to the 2 subjects over there as well. So it did tie into Stayton, but it was not directly a Stayton incident that day, if that makes sense. And those 2 are very known to us. In fact, I personally had a case involving a vehicle lewd with them and stolen credit cards. They're known in multiple counties, and so it was a wonderful arrest, a wonderful resolution, and there was a public safety override done, and they were lodged in jail. much needed resolution to that. So I guess I would just take the time to remind people, this is Stayton, we're a safe community, but things do happen in Stayton. We do get stolen cars, people leave their keys in the cars or running, which we've had at least 3 in the last 2 weeks that way. And that, my caution is always remove your keys from the car, turn your vehicle off if you're not in it. We just saw a big press release in the Amber Alert last night where a 7-year-old in Portland inadvertently was taken when a car was stolen up there. And I understand that's Portland, but these 2 that we dealt with in Sublimity, Stayton, go into multiple counties and people come here. So again, just safeguarding our valuables. I know it's unfortunate we have to think that way, but it's the world we live in, and clearly I see it more than you. We hope that the community you see every day is a little different than the ones that we deal with. So just wanted to give that update. Were there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Captain Johns. So I just have kind of a general, and I'm sorry for laying this on you right here in the middle of the public meeting, but how often would you say that your officers are providing courtesy response to Sublimity as a jurisdiction? Just curious.
I don't see it too frequently currently. So they have a Sublimity contract officer there 10 hours a day. My experience is he's there during the weekdays, so not nights and not weekends. We'll go over for alarms, and if there's something significant where we need to, additional officers to what they have. To give you a number, I'd have to do a little more searching.
None. So is it my understanding then that there's not just regular patrols going through Sublimity on the weekends or the evenings?
It's call driven. So if they have a priority call that's needing immediate response, then they'll dispatch a county deputy. If it's something that they don't consider, in police work isn't considered a priority response, then it's handled when the contract deputy's on.
So if I'm hearing you right, after those hours, it switches to a completely reactive police model in Sublimity. Do I have that right?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. No? Good enough. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we've got a presentation tonight on our Take Me Home project. There it is. So I don't mess this up.
So when were you gonna do the crime mapping first or the Take Me Home project first? Just
Either way, if you have a preference.
on the agenda, it's crime mapping, but I don't know that we really. There's a lot of reference.
Okay. All right, so on our City of Stayton website, under the Police tab, we've got the LexisNexis Community Crime Map. And I know Chief Friesendahl had previously introduced you to our crime mapping. This is a little bit different format and a little different layout. It does correspond with our records management system, and anything that's input into that, it's not through our CAD, but it's through anything that results in a full police report. So LexisNexis actually not only covers Stayton, but multiple jurisdictions. You're right. So if you enter Stayton, it'll bring up our map and our city. There's filters that we can do on here as well to narrow down what sort of search we want. But if we click on something like the money bag here, the money bag icon, it tells us that there's a theft. It gives us a basic address on Locust Street, and then talks about what ORS. So up in the right-hand corner, it tells us 164.045, that's corresponding to a Oregon revised statute. So if someone was interested enough to look that up, they would know what sort of crime that meant. It can be zoomed in to be able to get a little more specifics, and then there's different filters on here as well. So what I showed you there is just kind of like a sequence, still shots on what you could actually see on here. All right, this looks a little different than my view that I have. So I'm not sure why it's looking a little different than what I see. You've got filters on there, which I've showed on your handouts there, but you can filter in dates. So if you want to know in the last 3 months what's occurred, you can filter it by dates. You can filter it by activity. So if all you wanted to know was how many car prowls we've had, you can filter it down by that. You can bring up charts and graphs, and I'm going to go to my PowerPoint because this is maybe going to show it a little bit better. All right, so here's our filter. And basically you can check all of them if you wanted, or narrow it down and just check 1 or 2. And it's just going to give you that different view of what you have available to see on that map. Then you can also do a chart where you do a list of activities, so it's more text and you're not having it out on a map. And again, you can filter by activity, you can filter by date, and it gives you a list of what those activities are. And then here's the charts I was referring to. So your charts can be, got everything on there, so it looks a little congested, or you can narrow it down to kind of absorb it a little bit more. But if you see in the right-hand corner, this is a little helpful to us because we can see what our activities are based on days of the week and hours. And so that can help us focus our staffing a little bit more, focus maybe what neighborhoods we need to be paying attention to. But this helps the community maybe understand too what's going on. And so it's as our reports are complete and go into our system, then they populate into here. Sometimes there's some tweaking that we have to do because I noticed like our DUIs weren't showing up here correctly. So sometimes how they're titled depends how they actually go into this system. But it's a pretty useful system. You can also set yourself up for alerts. So if you cared to get alerts via email, there's a way to sign up to where you could say, I want to know if there's any, a particular type of crime in this particular area, and it'll send an email alert to you. Are there any questions? Nope. All right.
I have a question. How long has that been active?
Just in the last few months that it's been out where public can actually view it. All right, so Take Me Home project, again, under the police tab, and then we've got Take Me Home. And this is just a way that whether it's someone that's suffering from dementia, maybe has some memory issues, we have a child that has autism, someone that's got some intellectual disabilities, someone that, if lost, would need assistance getting reunited with their home. So people can come in and register loved ones with the police department, and what that means is basically we would have a system, if we got a report, we could match a name with the address, with the photo, maybe with some of their health concerns, how they process, what concerns maybe we have medically with them. And so it's just a way that gives us a tool to expedite reuniting people where they should be. So you'll see on here there's a brochure that talks about what the program is. And again, it's just a tool for us to be able to reunite people safely. We'll have these brochures at City Hall and at the police department. They can be accessed on the website. And then the other portion of that would be that the entry form is also on there. So if someone wants to fill that out and return to the police department with a photo, we can put that in and be able to help track. Any questions?
Councilor Ward, go ahead.
How long have we had this program?
The Take Me Home, we're just instituting it now.
I was gonna ask you if we had anyone on that, if you're just.
No, and we just suggested it to a family yesterday that we dealt with. So the father's suffering from dementia and starting to wander more frequently. And yesterday, we had the resources to know to get him back to the right place, but we talked with family and suggested this because should it be he can't communicate properly, for us to get a name and associate where he's supposed to go, or if family doesn't show up, this is a wonderful opportunity to get him in there.
Thank you.
Councilor Quigley.
Captain Johns, this is awesome. Having a family member that has dementia, I can really relate to this, so thank you for doing this. One recommendation for me would be, have you presented this yet to the retirement village?
No, so we're just pushing this out, but yeah, it's a wonderful idea, yes,
So I really appreciate you guys doing this, this is great.
absolutely.
If nothing else, I will go ahead and just echo what the other councilors have said. Thank you for putting this together. There were some names that were going through my head too. The other thing I wanted to go ahead and just take a quick note to say, you guys may have already done this and I'm not paying enough attention. Is this blasted out on Facebook yet? Not yet. Okay, cool. Can we make it? Cool. Councilor McDonald, anything? Okay. And Cap Johns.
Yeah, you're welcome, thank you.
So I just have one little thing, and just to point out, and maybe you didn't notice it, maybe you did, but it might come in handy going forward in the future, but your packets now have page numbers at the top, and that's for your entire packet, so that rather than referring to page 206 of the packet page on this, you'll be able to refer to that page number going forward, so just to help make things a little bit easier maybe. But I just wanted to point
Thank
that
you.
out. And other than that, I don't have any questions, but if you have questions for me, I don't have anything to share, but if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions for Julian? Okay. I think we're on communication from mayor and council at this point. Mayor's not here, but do any of you have anything to say? Well, I don't. So hearing nothing, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 8:39.